Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to Amhara Media Corporation. This is our daily news live from the studio. I am Gaila Damu. Stay with us. Press Secretary Bilene Siyum pointed out that framings of the international media have malicious intentions against Ethiopia. Ranward Anna reports.
The press secretary, who was interviewed by cable news network CNN, said CNN has, for instance, covered the conflict in northern Ethiopia over the past year with a manner that is highly biased and detached from the context. She also pointed out that the recent report of the news network that Addis Ababa was under siege by the terrorist TPLF and Iris Ali has caused tremendous panic on the people of Ethiopia.
A recent example is the hysteria that CNN had caused last week as if Addis Ababa was under siege, sending a global message that the city is about to go down. And we have often shared that it seems Ethiopia is undergoing what seems like a coordinated media campaign to tarnish the image of the country.
She further noted that CNN's ill-intended news framing has been tarnishing the image of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and his administration.
And media outlets like CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and Reuters in particular, as well as others, have often chosen to carry an overly negative and skewed narrative, missing important nuances.
Responding to CNN's journalist Becky Anderson that whether the international media, including CNN, that are currently not being allowed by the Ethiopian government to report and not being granted accreditation, Bilene noted that this was also misinformation. The allegation is among the disinformation being perpetrated by the foreign media.
Your team is on the ground, but your team did not come into the country, or some members of your team did not come into the country by following the due process.
As Ethiopia currently doesn't have a hostile environment to the media at all, Bilene elaborated that there are other media entities that had requested and facilitated entry into the country to cover stories they want. However, she revealed that many false stories are being fabricated by the headquarters of international media outlets and they are at the forefront to undermine Ethiopia's image.
Amnesty International disclosed that women from the town of Nufas Maucha in Ethiopia's Amhara region were raped by fighters from the Tigray People's Liberation Front during the group's attack on the town in mid-August 2021. Abebe Brahani has the details.
According to Amnesty International, survivors of rape, robbery and subjections to physical and verbal assaults of TPLF fighters disclosed that the terrorist TPLF has destroyed and looted medical facilities in the town. The TPLF took control of Nefas Maucha town in Amhara's Gaint district for 9 days between 12 and 21 August 2020 as part of an ongoing offensive into parts of Amhara and Afar regions. 16 women from the town told Amnesty International that they were raped by fighters from the TPLF during the group's attack on the town in mid-August 2021. 14 of the 16 women Amnesty International interviewed said they were gang raped. Regional government officials on their part told Amnesty International that more than 70 women reported to authorities that they were raped in Nefas Maucha during the period. Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Kalamard said the testimonies heard from the survivors describe despicable acts by TPLF fighters that amount to war crimes and potentially crimes against humanity. They defy morality or any iota of humanity. Survivors told Amnesty International that the attack began as soon as the TPLF took control of the town on 12 August 2021. The women all identified the perpetrators as TPLF fighters based on their accents and the ethnic slurs they used against victims, as well as their overt announcements that they were TPLF. A 30-year-old food seller in the town, Gavianish, told Amnesty International that it is not easy to tell what they did to her. She disclosed that 3 of the TPLF members raped her while her children were crying. She said that they did this cruelty in front of her children. According to her, the fighters did whatever they wanted and left and also assaulted me physically and took local food items. She stated that they also slapped and kicked her. Amnesty International further recounted that Hamelmal, a 28-year-old woman, sells injera in the town. She explained that 4 TPLF fighters raped her during the night of 13 August at her home while her daughter watched. She has children of 10 and 2 years old and she was scared that they might kill her daughters. The report depicted that she has been begging them to leave her children and let them do whatever they want from her. She narrated that the older daughter saw what happened. Bemnet, a 45-year-old Nafas Mouja resident, told Amnesty International that 4 TPLF fighters came to her house on the evening of 14 August and demanded her to make them coffee before 3 of them gang-raped her. Bemnet narrated that she suspected their intentions and sent away her daughters to stay away from the house and the soldiers ordered her to bring them back. She stated that she refused what they asked, then they started to insult her. The statement also revealed that one of the soldiers told others not to insult and not to harm her because she could be their mother. Though they left her home, 3 of them stayed back at her home and raped her in turns. Maskaram, the other resident, aged 30, told Amnesty International that 3 TPLF fighters raped her and beat her with the butts of their guns. The lady who sells kolo, the local cereal-based food, said 4 of the soldiers came to her restaurant and they ate and drank whatever was in the house. Then 2 of them raped her and also took her ring and necklace. Frehewot said she was gang-raped several times by TPLF fighters between 12 and 20 August and that one fighter stole her phone and cash. Tigis said the TPLF fighters who raped her on 12 August also destroyed her shop items and took her jewelry. Amnesty International noted that while 2 of the women have sought basic private medical treatment since the rape, damage and looting to the town's hospital and health station by the TPLF attack has meant that none of the survivors interviewed has been able to access comprehensive post-rape care, including emergency contraception, prophylaxis for HIV and sexual transmitted infections, assessment and treatment of injuries, or focused therapy for mental health care. An NGO that normally provides such service told Amnesty International that it cannot access the area due to security concerns prompted by the government's hostile public statement about international humanitarian organizations. 15 of the 16 rape survivors Amnesty International interviewed described suffering physical and mental health problems as a result of the attacks. They described a variety of symptoms including back pain, bloody urine, difficulty walking, anxiety and depression. Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Kalamard finally noted that TPLF fighters must immediately stop all human rights abuses and violations of international humanitarian law, including sexual and gender-based violence. The leadership must make clear that such abuses will not be tolerated and remove suspected perpetrators from their ranks. He further stressed that the government must ensure allegations of all sexual violences are promptly, effectively, independently and impartially investigated. They must bring those suspected of criminal responsibility to justice in open, accessible civilian courts in full compliance with international standards for fair trial without recourse to the death penalty and reparations for the survivors. It is to be recalled that the government of Ethiopia has been repeatedly trying to expose the atrocities being committed by the group. These concerns of the government were not, however, given the appropriate attention by the international community.
Senior Ethiopian water experts state the speedy completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is vital to force the lower riparian countries into a negotiated agreement. We have more. Water experts approached by Ethiopian news agencies say the construction of the dam is progressing well, particularly since the past 3 years. Water supply and environmental engineering assistant professor at Hawassa University, Meret Dananto, said that the construction of GERD should continue with more speed than ever before, as its swift completion provides the nation additional leverage to repel the ongoing pressure. He stated that the government has to enhance public participation for the construction of GERD and water diplomacy. In this regard, he pointed out that Ethiopia has to continue its key role to pushing the 11 riparian countries in order to bring the equal and just share of the Nile River among the nations. Hawassa University Department of Irrigation and Water Resources Engineering Associate Professor Moltos Zaude said for his part that the construction of the dam is progressing well since the past 3 years. He said that the dam has previously delayed for so long from its schedule and was messed up with corruption. But now the dam is showing good progress in the past 2 to 3 years. He noted that campaigns speeding up the construction and updating information are vital. He added that still the current status of GERD is enough for strong negotiating position for Ethiopia, and more accelerating the completion of the construction will help the countries reach the negotiated deal. The construction of the GERD has reached more than 80%. The Western nations are intervening in the internal affairs of the country in their biased media, and they are voicing the propaganda of the terrorist TPLF through their media. Regarding their attempt, a scholar from Bahar Dar University expressed this view from professional perspective. Bugradi Zaudu presents the story as follows.
Nations are trying to intervene in internal affairs of Ethiopia in so many ways. However, their intervention is not with the intention of finding solutions that benefit Ethiopia. Rather, it is to ensure their desire of establishing a puppet government which they can play with a joystick. Organized attempts are being made against the sovereignty of the country. Dis and misinformation and posing sanctions are the recent manifestation of their oppression, but Ethiopians stand in unison more than ever to break their yoke of oppression. Regarding the Western media mis- and disinformation about Ethiopia, Amhara Media Corporation talked to Associate Professor Adam Jane of Bahar Dar University Journalism and Communication Department. According to him, the reports made by media houses like CNN and BBC is unethical and subjective, which doesn't consider principles of journalism.
Seeing from the journalistic perspective, from the professional journalism perspective, specifically in ethical journalism perspective, the Western media such as CNN, BBC, the Washington Post and others, other major stream mass media are far from the truth. They are avoiding these journalistic principles and professional ethical lines and breaking the truth. And they are engaged in a warfare, manipulation of information, and they are creating information disorder with falsification, creating fake news, misinformation and disinformation. So by doing that, they are far from really journalistic profession, and they are engaged in intensive propaganda.
The associate professor also indicated that the Western media are working to weaken African countries so as to impose their ideologies.
And seeing from a historical perspective, even we can associate this one with how the Western media portray Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular. And this is a persistence of a century-old creating of false image towards Ethiopia. I mean, they are not far from the syndrome of starvation in Africa, the syndrome of displacement, war and conflict, and specifically civil war, coup d'etat. They wanted to see the Ethiopian situation revolving around those problems. And they couldn't break this bondage and creating false narration and seeing this is normal in Africa. And Ethiopia couldn't enable to solve its problem because we're in Africa, specifically we're in East Africa, and they try to show they are helpless and they can't solve their own problem by themselves, so that they try to clear the ground for sanctions and other Western interventions by creating those false narration. And it's a kind of colonial legacy in one way or another. We're seeing from a professional point of view, of seeing from the historical point of view Or in another way, I could say even this is one way of electronic colonization, using huge mass media, and they try to day and night bombarded the Western, specifically the Western community, that Ethiopia is helpless and can't manage the problem, so that Western intervention is very important.
He added that at times like this, Ethiopians should stand in unison and work on their foreign relations.
From the international perspective, I think doing diplomacy is one way. We have to have work towards that direction, work hard. We have to inform the truth. Our truths are inside the country, I can say. So we have to speak for the world community, the global community, that we can manage the problems, that we face the crisis by our own. And we have to work on that. Now, public diplomacy or our embassies outside the country and even other Ethiopians abroad, such as the diaspora community and the scholars in and outside Ethiopia could do that. In another one, what matter our faith is our unity and our strength. So if you work hard in unity, and if you understand, we can maintain our country, and we may not even dismantle as they wish. So hard work, unity is vital important than other times.
Ethio-American journalist Hermela Regawi said that reports of some Western media about the current situation in Ethiopia are inaccurate and one-sided. Abebe Birhane tells us more.
Exclusive interview with Ethiopian news agency, the journalist said, broadly speaking, the reports have been inaccurate and there are lots of glaring gaps with particular reports within each media organization. In terms of humanitarian assistance in Tigray, they say there was a de facto blockade and that was not true as humanitarian aid was going into the region.
For example, a lot of the reports by CNN's Nima El-Bakir have been very one-sided, that have been really speaking the narrative of what the rebels want people to believe in terms of genocide and ethnic cleansing. There have been no reports on CNN about TPLF militias going into the Amhara and Afar regions where thousands have died. So that's a really very huge thing to ignore if you're trying to be balanced.
The Tigray militia-led fighting in Amhara and Afar regions continued, where lots of people were killed and at least 200 people killed in Kombolcha city. Hermela stated the New York Times and the Wall Street newspaper have also been writing the same narrative as CNN, not recognizing the other aspect of the war that the TPLF militia is doing. She elaborated whether intentionally or not, the narratives really support a rebel group, pretending that the group is a victim and taking the elected government as a culprit. The journalist further recalled that a couple of days ago, there were a group of so-called Federalists and Confederalists that convened press conference attended by presses like Reuters and New York Times in Washington, D.C. and declared that they were going to forcibly dismantle the Ethiopian government. Hermela noted that there is no real indication that this group represents nobody in Ethiopia. It looks like it was a group that was created by TPLF allies or officials. She said, such kinds of issues might indicate that the U.S. government and their media are in some ways helping the TPLF and trying to overthrow the elected government, adding that the narrative is pushing the rebel insurgency as something that is valid.
What is beneficial to the United States and to the Horn of Africa, it seems that the U.S. would want to support a democracy and would want to support a prime minister that has been elected by the majority of the people, because that is the thing that's going to lead to peace.
She said that the U.S. narrative seems to equate the Ethiopian government with the rebels that are fighting the elected government. According to the journalist, these days there is a lot of pressure, including a protest in D.C. this morning, pushing the U.S. to live up to its democratic values. Over the past couple of days, Ethiopians also staged mass rallies across the country, engaging in pushing back against this false narrative. Regarding the continued pressure of the US on the government of Ethiopia, Hermela said the officials have relationship with some of the TPLF leadership. It is unclear who really is making the decisions in terms of the State Department and the US government. She revealed that there are lots of personal relationships, potentially some with financial gain.
You're watching Amhara Media Corporation, Amhara TV News, and now let's take a look at foreign exchange rate in karat rate. That's all the news we have for today. I am Gaila Damu. Many thanks for watching and have a wonderful time.